For the first time this season, Purdue plays an opponent ranked higher than them Tuesday night in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's going to be a fun one in a game that may be more important than any we've seen in Big Ten play.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into a special crossover edition of Locked On Boilermakers and Locked On Nebraska. We're talking everything coming up about this huge Big Ten matchup on Tuesday night. It's going to be a fun one, and I'm joined today by the host of Locked On Nebraska, Mitch Sherman. Mitch, this is going to be a fun one, a game that is huge for a variety of different reasons as we really get down the stretch in Big Ten conference play. We're going to get into why this game could be one of the biggest games to happen all year. We'll hop into some matchups, players, and of course, end off with the predictions. So make sure you stick around for that. But Mitch, how are you feeling about this game as we start to open up this show? What are just your first you look at this game, what crosses your mind about this one?
Yeah, great to be with you, Nick. It's a rare moment for Nebraska, as have been pretty much all the moments this season, at least since we got into maybe late December, early January, and truly realized what a unique and special season this is for Nebraska basketball. Of course, for Purdue and most of the teams hanging around the top of the Big Ten standings this year, it's nothing new. But for Nebraska to be 21-2, obviously this is the best start in school history. Going 20-0 was unprecedented, and Nebraska's going for its 11th conference win, which would be its most in the Big Ten era for Nebraska. So everything that Nebraska has done over the last couple of months has been just breaking down one barrier after another. And interestingly, a barrier that Nebraska has broken through before this season is beating a great Purdue team at Pinnacle Bank Arena in Lincoln. It was just 2 years ago that the Huskers beat number one ranked Purdue, one of the biggest wins in the history of the Nebraska basketball program. So, I think there's some confidence that comes from probably the people around the program, the fans, who last saw Purdue come into Lincoln with a number one ranking. Obviously, that's not the case this year, but it's a good Purdue team. People feel good. I think people feel good about the health of this Nebraska basketball team. The 2-game stretch where Nebraska lost, it was down a couple of key players and has since returned to good health. So people are feeling good after a 12-point win at Rutgers on Saturday.
Both of these teams are ranked in the top 15 of the AP poll that just released as we're filming this. Before we talk about that, I do just want to say today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in that work, that defines you. Stay tuned for the highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. And I'm sure we'll both have some players to throw out for that segment. But the reason why I say that these two teams are kind of in different spots is because of the expectations going into this year. And I don't necessarily want to speak for Nebraska what the expectation was there, but I'm sure you guys didn't expect to go 20-0 to start out this year. And for Purdue, this was a season where by the players, by Coach Matt Painter, it was labeled championship or bust. And then you lose 3 out of your last 5, like one against your rival, one at UCLA, and then against Illinois at home, who you guys also lost to. I feel like this is a really interesting matchup because it's really going to tell a lot about what these two teams are. For Purdue, are they capable of beating a really high-quality opponent, especially on the road? That's something we're going to figure out tonight. And then for Nebraska, are you guys capable of beating that high-quality opponent? You beat Michigan State earlier in the year. You mentioned there were some injuries there, but I'm not going to fault the Huskers for losing to Illinois or Michigan, which are now probably the top 2 teams in the Big Ten as we stand. There's going to be a lot answered in this game tonight. What do you think is going to be the key for a Nebraska if they want to stay at home, take advantage of this game, and beat Purdue once again for the second time in 3 years?
Yeah, first of all, you talk about expectations, and the expectations for Nebraska this year were nothing like what the expectations were, as you describe, for the Boilers. It was a good season for Nebraska, as it is in every year in Lincoln, was to make the NCAA tournament, and obviously things have changed. The bar has been raised. The 20-0 start will do that, and there were questions about Nebraska's legitimacy through November and December. Some nice wins. Nebraska beat its in-state rival Creighton, which is having a down season by its standards. A couple of okay wins as they look now, and against Big 12 teams, Oklahoma and Kansas State. But really, Nebraska didn't have a whole lot to measure itself by until December came around, and Nebraska blew out Wisconsin, which was unexpected. And then right after the turn of the new year, Nebraska takes out Michigan State at home, somewhat unexpected, and then very unexpectedly goes on the road and wins on a buzzer beater by Jamarcus Lawrence at Illinois. And that's when I think the nation began to realize that this was not your just a normal good story for Nebraska. It was a team that was legitimately a contender to make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. So, what you're looking for from Nebraska in this game is just really to keep it going. Nebraska has not come out and played a game that was substandard all season. I think it's reasonable to expect that any team in the country is going to have one or two nights or afternoons in a season where you just aren't at your best. You lay a bit of an egg and you lose. You get knocked off by a team that you weren't expecting to lose to. I know Purdue was coming off 3 consecutive losses at the end of January. That certainly wasn't expected for Matt Painter and his group. And Nebraska just hasn't had a stretch like that. The 2 losses, 3 points on the road at Michigan without 2 of the top players in two of Nebraska's top 6 players. And then a few days later at home against Illinois, a game Nebraska led at halftime and still was relatively shorthanded. And Illinois was just a better team in the second half of that game. It wasn't that Nebraska played poorly. So there hasn't been one of those days against a Big Ten team, at least, where the Huskers have not looked like a solid, smart, fundamental, well put together on the offensive and defensive side basketball team. What Nebraska's hoping for in this game tonight is to just continue that and to play the style of basketball that's gotten it to 21-2, that's gotten to the 10 conference win mark. I think the expectation is that Nebraska will be okay. Nebraska will be able to accept whatever happens in this game and for the rest of the regular season, as long as it plays the kind of basketball that we've seen for 23 games. I'm curious, Nick, from your perspective, what happened to Purdue a couple of weeks ago that sent it on that skid that now seems to be over with a couple of wins after the 3 losses. But even that game against Oregon on Saturday was a little closer than I think everyone was expecting there.
So I've really battled with this. I've thrown a couple different things at the wall, trying to figure out really what sticks in terms of figuring out kind of what went wrong for Purdue. So when you look at that first loss, it's that West Coast trip. And now that has been a very tough trip for basically everybody to go in and beat UCLA and USC. So that was one where I wasn't too upset about it. You lose that game. That was Purdue's first conference loss. It was what it was. And then, you kind of hold the same thing against Illinois at home. That's a game where you led for a good portion of it. But when you let Keaton Wagler go for 40+ points, you're likely not going to win that game. So there were definitely some issues there regarding the defense, just a lot of miscommunication, couldn't really guard the perimeter for a good portion there where teams were just able to get whatever they wanted. And as good as Purdue's offense is, if you can't guard them, can't beat them. So that's what we ran into for the first 2 losses. But then you go into Bloomington, and that was a get-right game for Purdue to the highest standard. That was a game that, in my opinion, you had to win. And then they fall apart at the end. A wide-open 3 is what seals it. That's kind of the story for me, is on the defensive side, we just really haven't been able to get the stops. And we're not a team where we have the pace or we play with the urgency that if other teams are making shots, you can necessarily always get back into those games. So that has been the issue lately for Purdue. They do win 2 games against Maryland, against Oregon, but that's not Nebraska. And that's why this game is so interesting for me, so intriguing, because Purdue has the opportunity to really play up and hopefully beat a really high quality team, one of those teams in the top 5, in my personal opinion. And that's why the stakes are so high in this one. There are 5 teams fighting for a double bye. One of those teams aren't going to be able to get it in the Big Ten tournament. I think this game really does go a long way in determining not just that. Also, Nebraska projected to be a 2 seed, according to Joe Lunardi. Purdue at that 3 seed. Who knows? This game could determine this between a 2 seed or a 3 seed for both of these teams.
Right.
There's a ton riding on this game that isn't just at the surface. I'm excited for it. I know you're excited for it. And we're going to get into some of these players and matchups here next on this Locked On Crossover. But first, this is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. And against Oregon, it was by no means a great performance. Purdue struggled, but at the end, when they needed it, Fletcher Lawyer made the big shot that got it done. With 18 points, he was my Mazda moving the game player. For Saturday's matchup against Oregon, Mitch, who do you got for the Nebraska side? Who was your moving the game forward player?
Yeah, the player here this week is Rink Mast, who was missing in action for several games and was literally missing in the Michigan game, and then not himself when Nebraska came home to face Illinois. Against Rutgers, Rink Mast, Nebraska's center, was senior center, the most veteran player on this team, was back in his early season form with 26 points and 8 rebounds, and he's going to be a huge key moving forward for Nebraska. He's the guy that so much of this offense goes through, and that's why he's the pick this week.
These guys remind us what it really takes to raise that bar. It's that extra work off the court, and we put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels, and that's why you should turn over to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. And they've got everything you could possibly need for a full home refresh all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or just upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and your budget. And I recently moved into a new place, so I had to use Wayfair. I was able to get all my bedding situated with them. It was so easy to get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year, and you can too for way less. So head on over to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. It's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, welcome back. Tuesday crossover episode, Locked On Nebraska and Locked On Boilermakers. I'm Mitch Sherman, joined by Nick Arvin. We're talking about this matchup, Nebraska against Purdue. The Huskers hosting Purdue tonight at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Tip-off is 6 o'clock Central, 7 Eastern. FS1 tonight. Kevin Kugler, the Nebraska grad, Nebraska native, on the play-by-play call. You hear him on Fox on the NFL. He's on FS1 for this college basketball game tonight with Bill Raftery. So big crew in town at Pinnacle Bank Arena tonight, and it's a big game. Nebraska moves up 2 spots to number 7 on Monday in the Associated Press Top 25. Purdue comes in at number 13 after a close victory on Saturday at home against Oregon. Purdue's 19-4, 9-3 in the Big Ten. Nebraska, of course, 21-2, as we've mentioned, 10-2 in the Big Ten. Let's talk about the matchups, the keys to this game. Nick, what do you see as the biggest matchup, maybe as it impacts Purdue heading into this game tonight?
In terms of what I fear for Purdue, it's the amount of talented forwards that Nebraska does bring. And honestly, to start out this year, I would have said that would be a benefit for Purdue, or something they could look at and say, hey, we have the advantage in the front court with Trey Coppin-Rim, with Oscar Clough, who you bring over from South Dakota State. But that just really hasn't been the case as of late. The front court hasn't been as dominated. It hasn't dominated people the way that we would have hoped to start out this season. You talk about it against Oregon, where Nate Biddle was a game time decision in that game, the big 7-footer over there. He actually does play, and it felt like they just didn't game plan for him, like they weren't ready for him. but Oregon wins the points in the paint in that basketball game. That can't happen against Nebraska. You have the experience with a Trey Kaufman, who's a fifth-year senior. You've got Oscar Clough, who was a double-double machine last year at South Dakota State. Those guys really need to play up to that standard. So if Purdue's going to win this game, I think the biggest matchup is in the front court, trying to out-rebound this Husker squad. We'll see if they're able to do it, but if they're not, I have a lot of concerns about this game.
Yeah, I'm used to, Nick, watching Purdue and seeing the 7-footers, if not one, then 2 7-footers on the court at the same time. We've seen that from Purdue, and in the games where Nebraska wasn't able to get over the top this season, those back-to-back losses against Michigan and Illinois, it was that interior presence that gave the Huskers all kinds of problems. And in part, that was because, I think those two teams give anybody problems with their post players, and would have given Nebraska, even at full strength, all kinds of problems if they're to meet Michigan or Illinois again in the Big Ten tournament, or even in the NCAA tournament. Nebraska at full strength with Rink Mast healthy is going to have trouble with the front courts of those teams. But it was really on display. The weakness that Nebraska had in that game was very much on display. Mast not playing at all because of a stomach illness in Ann Arbor, and then he was back for the game against Illinois, but was not himself and was held scoreless until the final minute of that game. So, I have to look at that too and say, all right, could that be an advantage for Purdue in this contest, even if Purdue isn't as dominant, as strong in the front court as what Nebraska faced against Illinois and Michigan? That's going to be an area where Purdue is well coached, where Purdue traditionally has been very strong. And for Nebraska, it's about having Rink Mast at full strength. I mentioned in the ad read there that he went for 26 points and 8 rebounds against Rutgers, and what was just a good get well game for the senior forward from the Netherlands. He'd been struggling even before he got sick with just some poor shooting, and he's really a strong shooting big man. In Fred Hoiberg's system, these are the kind of bigs that thrive. What he's looking for, the way that he wants to run his offense, is through those 6'10", 6'11" players who can distribute the ball, who can take it at the top of the key, and who can knock down shots, in addition to being able to play in the paint. And Mast has been fantastic at that. After redshirting a year ago with the knee injury, he's been incredible for Nebraska for the majority of this season, and it was massively important for Nebraska to get him back in good form against Rutgers headed into this stretch of the final 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season. So I see Rink Mast as a key in the paint, and then the other guy is the other player for Nebraska who had been dealing with missing some time. That's Braden Frager, the true freshman from Lincoln. I'm sorry, redshirt freshman from Lincoln, Nebraska. He should be a true freshman, but he reclassified and took his senior year of high school and spent it as a redshirt last year in Lincoln. So now he's in his second year of college, and until Keaton Wagler turned into a candidate for a lottery pick and one of the top freshman in the country, certainly an All-America candidate. Frager was one of the contenders for freshman of the year in the Big Ten. I think he could still be on the All Big Ten freshman team. He had an ankle injury that caused him to miss the Michigan game, the Minnesota game, also before the Michigan game. And he's so important for Nebraska's ability to score near the basket. Nebraska's, I think everybody knows, who looks at their numbers, relies heavily on the 3-point shot. And with Price Stanford, with Jamarcus Lawrence, with Sam Hoiberg, those guys are all shooting at a high clip and have been clutch this season. Well, Frager is also a shooter, but he's a slasher, and he's somebody that can get to the hoop. And we haven't seen that as much from him in the 2 games since he's come back from the injury. Even against Illinois, when he was back and semi-healthy and he hit 6 3-pointers, you didn't see the kind of slashing and movement toward the hoop, toward the rim, that had made him such a good player for the first 20 games of this season, 19 or 20 games of this season. Nebraska's going to need that against Purdue. Nebraska needs to have all hands on deck. It needs to be strong in the paint. I think you're going to be at Nebraska if it's going to be a threat in this game and a threat down the stretch and in the postseason. It's going to have to rely on 3-point shooting, but it's not just that. Like these teams in the Big Ten, these top 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten that Nebraska is going to see and has seen. And I'd even throw Iowa into that mix, which is on a hot streak, and Nebraska has 2 games still to play against the Hawkeyes. You have to be well-rounded. It can't just be about 3-point shooting. It's going to be a key tonight for Nebraska to get points in the paint, and primarily that lies on the shoulders of Rink Mast and Braden Frager.
I'm really glad that you did bring up Braden Frager, because that's such an interesting, just him coming off the bench, kind of being that X factor for you guys off the bench as a redshirt freshman. We have someone similar now, not at all in the same position. It's 7'4" Daniel Jacobson, who is a redshirt freshman.
There's the 7-footer right there.
Yeah, right there. Coming off the bench for us. It's a really intriguing matchup where he's honestly been playing more minutes than Oscar Clough has as of late, coming off the bench, because Clough has been a little bit streaky as of late. So that's another key for me, is which one of these redshirt freshmen off the bench is really capable of making an impact in this game. But before we get to our final notes and predictions, I do just want to ask you one more thing. When you think of Purdue, you think of Braden Smith. That's just what it is, right? He's the all-time leading assister in Big Ten play. And this is going to be a guy that, although the turnovers have been a little bit of a concern as of late, he's going to hurt you on most nights. So for Nebraska, who do you guys throw at him? Who do you throw at Braden Smith to not necessarily stop him, but try to limit his production?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably Sam Hoiberg, at least in terms of the size. It's finally somebody that Sam Hoiberg can match up with, another 6-footer. But it's amazing that we talked for 19 or 20 minutes on this episode here, and Braden Smith's name did not come up one time. So I'm so glad that you brought him up, because I was about to bring him up before we got to that next break. Like, we had to talk about Braden Smith. Sam Hoiberg is not necessarily going to be the guy that Nebraska uses to lock down the opponent's best player, because often, like in the case of Keaton Wagler, when Nebraska played Illinois, the opponent's best player is a wing, or he's an off guard. He's 6'6", and that's difficult for Hoiberg at 6 foot. The head coach's son, of course, to be able to guard somebody and match up with somebody like that. And in those cases, Nebraska's often gone to Price Sanford, who the Iowa transfer, sharpshooter, who can defend and is quick enough to stay with those players. But I think it'll be Hoiberg. We'll see when they match up after the tip. It's always a bit of a chess match, but I've got to think that they're going to put Sam Hoiberg on Braden Smith. He's been as efficient and just as fundamental as any player in the Big Ten this season. You see his numbers and it's like, all right, well, he does a little bit of a lot of things, like scores 8 to 10 points a game. He's actually Nebraska's second leading rebounder at 6 feet tall, which is an incredible feat. And it just shows the smarts and the awareness that Sam Hoiberg has on the court. But he gets steals. He doesn't turn the ball over. He dishes out assists. So a different kind of player for sure than Braden Smith. But I do think that we'll see them matching against each other on Tuesday night.
So you got Moss versus Wren. You've got Hoiberg versus Smith. It's going to be a fun game tonight. We're going to get into our predictions, who we've got winning this game, our final takes about Tuesday night's matchup. That's coming up here next on this Locked On Crossover.
This episode is brought to you by TurboTax, a moment to talk about tax season, because it does not have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, just meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They will handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, and they'll work to get you every deduction. You just upload your documents, go about your day, and then get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, gives real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling everything. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in, if a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year. Just get your filings done by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today.
We've talked everything about how important this game is going to be tonight. We've talked about the matchups. Braden Smith is going to be big. Maybe Sam Hoiberg has something to say about that. There's a lot there's a lot of different moving pieces surrounding this matchup. So I want to go ahead and talk about just some of these final takeaways we have for this, and of course, get to our predictions for this huge top 15 matchup. And this is really going to determine a lot in the Big Ten. One thing that you did mention when you talked about the matchups, and something I've noticed with Nebraska, is they love to shoot that three ball. That's something that they have built their identity around. And for Purdue, the perimeter defense has definitely been an issue. So if Nebraska is going to win this game, I think they make the three ball. If Purdue is going to win this game, they have to stop Nebraska from making that three ball. As important as the post is going to be, as important as these bigs are going to be in this game, flat out, if Purdue can't stop Nebraska from shooting threes and converting, they're not going to win this game. Mitch, what is one thing you think that Nebraska needs to do to win this game, or one thing that they can't do if they want to win this game?
Yeah, I think anytime Nebraska plays Purdue, you can change the jersey numbers, you can change the bodies. Like, we know how Purdue builds a program and how Purdue builds a team. You mentioned the 7'4" body coming off the bench that's not even in the starting lineup. Nebraska can't get dominated on the boards, and that was a problem for the Huskers. Again, without Rink Mast in one game, and then without Rink Mast at full strength in the other. But Rink Mast is not an above the rim kind of big. Like, he's a crafty big. He finds ways to get rebounds, but I'm under no illusion that he's a dominant rebounder. Nebraska just can't get destroyed on the boards. Like, it has to find a way to be somewhat close to even, and especially for on the defensive glass, where Nebraska has gotten in trouble, not just in the two games that it lost, but in some other games that have remained closer for longer periods of time, even in some of the non-conference games where it took a strong second half for Nebraska to pull away. It's been the ability of opponents to get offensive rebounds and find second chance points that has been a problem for Nebraska. So I look at this game and I say, hey, Purdue probably has an edge in being able to rebound, and I would expect that just about any time that these two programs get together, but it's got to be a situation where Nebraska closes the gap.
So I'm going to ask you this question, and when I ask it, I don't necessarily mean who's Nebraska's best player or who's going to be the player that you think is going to score the most points, but who do you think is going to be the X factor in this game? Maybe someone that's a little bit under the radar, but a guy that if they come up big, that really helps you win this game.
Yeah, I'm going to say Jamarcus Lawrence. And he is a little bit under the radar. There's a lot of talk about Rink Mast because he's seen as like the glue to this team. There's a lot of talk about Braden Frager, the emerging freshman who's been a surprise and a true wild card for this team. There's a lot of talk about Sam Hoiberg because of how hard he plays and the fact that he's the coach's son, that he does a little bit of everything. He's a great defensive player, a clutch shooter. The same thing with Price Sanford, who's been on fire for much of the Big Ten season, is on track to set the school record for Nebraska for three-pointers in a season. Not as much talk about Jamarcus Lawrence. Jamarcus Lawrence was a fairly important piece for Nebraska 2 years ago, and then he transferred, went to Rhode Island last season, came back to Nebraska from Rhode Island, the rare transfer back to the school that you transferred from kind of situation. He hit the buzzer beater against Illinois to win that game, and he's been very, very clutch at home. He's a player who I think gets into the flow of the game and feeds off the energy of the crowd. And it, even with a 6 p.m. start, it's a bit of an early start for the atmosphere to be maybe as strong as it would be on like a weekend afternoon or a 7 or 8 p.m. tip on a Tuesday night. A little bit more difficult to get to this game if you're working on Tuesday, but the fans will be there. It'll be completely full by the time the game starts. And Jamarcus Lawrence is a guy for Nebraska who has the ability to feed off that and hit some big shots. What's your answer to the same question?
Yeah, it's going to be CJ Cox for me. Now, everyone knows about the seniors, Trey Kaufman, Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith. They've been here for 4 years. TKR has been here for 5. But CJ Cox this year is a sophomore, and what his role has been is kind of that low-volume guy on offense where you have so many different mouths to feed. You need an off-ball guard that can convert shots when they need to be made. And that's kind of what CJ has been. He struggled as of late on the offensive side, but on the defensive side, as good of a point of attack defender as you will ever find. He's really impressed me defensively this year as he's kind of grown into that role in the starting lineup. I want to see him continue to do that on the defensive side. I think that's going to be huge for Purdue in this game. And then on offense, I want him to make a couple shots. We haven't seen it as of late. If he can make a couple shots, I think that really turns the tide, maybe, into Purdue's favor. But our friends at FanDuel have this game as +1.5. Purdue, Nebraska is the favorite in this game. Let's go ahead. I'll let you lead out. What is your prediction for this game? Who do you have winning and by how much?
You know, my co-host Connor can attest to this. I've picked against Nebraska all season. Going back to November, I didn't think we would be doing podcasts about Nebraska basketball here in February. I thought we would be looking ahead to spring football practice, and that's happening anyway. But it's been a basketball season unlike any other in Lincoln. When Nebraska played Oklahoma back in November, I thought that the Huskers would lose. When Nebraska played Creighton in December, I figured Nebraska would lose. When Big Ten play started against Wisconsin, I said, all right, this is when reality hits home for Nebraska basketball. Same thing when the Huskers played Michigan State. I'm done at this point picking against Nebraska. Fair. Once Nebraska got to 20-0, I was like, all right, I'll just pick Nebraska to win. And then, of course, it went and lost 2 consecutive games. But back in the win column on Saturday, and I'll say that continues against Purdue. 74-71 is my pick in this game tonight. It's I think everyone expects it's going to be a very close game, a hard-fought game. Probably comes down to a couple of shots in the second half, and I'm just not in the state of mind at this point where I'm picking against Nebraska after watching them play for 2.5 months.
I'm kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum with you, where I've really picked Purdue to win most of these big games just because of all the expectations that were said. And that's really how we started out this episode. But with that being said, I'm kind of on the opposite side of the coin right now. I want Purdue to show me that they can win a tough game before I feel confident enough picking it. Now, Oregon, Maryland, that's one thing. Nebraska on the road on a Tuesday night is a different thing. I think this is going to be a close game. I think our guys are going to show a ton of fight. But I just worry that Nebraska may be a little bit too much because I do think there's still some issues outstanding that we haven't gotten figured out yet. Now, does that mean Purdue is going to lose to Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament if they play? I'm not willing to say that because I think this team still has a lot of growth. But as of right now, I'm not confident picking them over the Huskers. So I'm going to say they lose by about 6. 70-64 is my final result in this one. I have Nebraska winning another huge game at home. But that's it. That's all we got today for this.
It's the kiss of death. We've given them the kiss of death. We both picked Nebraska to win.
we have. So hopefully that works out in our favor. But we'll see in just a few hours tonight. Nebraska, Purdue. It's going to be a fun one. Thank you for coming on the show, Mitch. I always end out these crossovers, or I just usually end out the episode saying boiler up, hammer down. That's how I like to end them out. But I want to be inclusive to you, to everyone that comes on the crossovers. Is there anything you'd like to say as we end out today's episode?
I don't have a slogan like that. I just want to tell people to make sure they're following Locked On Nebraska on all of our social channels and listening to our daily episodes. We have a lot of fun, and it's been great to come on today and hang out with you, Nick.
They do a great show over there. Make sure you check out Locked On Nebraska for all the Purdue fans out there. If you're a Nebraska fan, want to listen to a little bit of Purdue basketball, I'm here, Locked On Boilermakers. It's my first season here on the network, but having a lot of fun. So make sure you check me out. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.